Tommy Reynolds has his gun out. He's pointing the gun, and all of a sudden, I see this woman.
They say it's on every single station. They're saying that Daddy died.
He said there was an accident and your father is no longer with us.
In real life, I'm not like that.
And the Mario test was disgusting.
One night I jumped out of a car doing 60 miles an hour because I was addicted.
Salute, Mob Tube. Salute, Mob Tube. How is everybody tonight? All right, so I'm sure some of you saw the thumbnail, and you might have heard Jimmy Calandra promote this a little bit at the end of his show. I do have a special guest on tonight. I'm very excited. A lot of people worked hard to try to find out who this was, but as you know now, it's Robert Iler, or as you may know him, AJ Soprano.
How's it going?
What's up, Robert?
Thanks for having me.
Oh, no doubt, man. Thank you for coming on. I appreciate this. I want to thank John DeLuca, of course, for helping us set this up, a mutual friend of ours.
Absolutely, and our boy Ron set it up too. It's man, it's great to it's great to be here. I was gonna be 20 minutes early, and instead I was a little late because the Super Bowl traffic in LA is out of control. And it's Tuesday, and the game's not till Sunday, but it's wild. I guess a lot of people are getting in today.
Yeah, they're getting ready, huh?
Yeah.
All right, so I want to start off, from the beginning. Obviously, I'd like to talk to you a little bit about your upbringing. I listened to some of your past interviews, and you actually have a very interesting story. So if you don't mind just telling us a little bit about your childhood and how you grew up pre-Sopranos.
Yeah, I mean, my parents were super young when they had me. I don't even know if they were like boyfriend and girlfriend or what, but they both grew up on 83rd Street in New York City, like between 1st and 2nd. And they had me. I think my mom was like 18, maybe. My dad was younger than her, but I think he was 18 or whatever. And then, I didn't start. But when I was 6 years old, the guy who's still my manager now, I was walking down the street, and he stopped my dad and said, your son should try and do commercials or whatever. And that's, over 30 years ago, and he's still my manager today. But man, it's growing up in New York City in like the late 80s, early 90s. And I just went back there for the holidays, and I was like, man, it kind of feels like it's the clock's being turned back a little. You get that vibe, like it's that more gritty instead of like everybody walking around in like suits with their hair done and briefcases. I felt that gritty feeling that I remember when I was a kid.
Yeah. And what's the differences now? Now you're in LA. What are you? Do you miss New York a lot of the time? Or
I miss New York a lot, but I moved to Vegas back big into like partying and drugs and shit, and I was living in New York, and I was just like, man, this place it's not hard enough, like they're like, it's a city that doesn't sleep. I'm like, they sleep too much for me, so I moved out to Vegas alone, just to fucking party and gamble and be insane. But after that I moved to LA, because what happened was like I did 2 winters away from New York, and then you go back and you do a winter and you're like, what the fuck am I doing here? Like it's, and like I got sober. So spending, 3 months where you don't want to go outside because your face hurts and it's freezing and you got to bundle up and this, it's just like, because those months back in the day never bothered me because I was just fucking drink and do drugs and they would fly by,
Yeah. No, absolutely. So you did some commercials and stuff as a kid, but then obviously the Sopranos came along. How did that happen?
Yeah, so I was 6 when I started auditioning for stuff, and I did a bunch of commercials, and then a couple things in my life happened, and in my family's life, and when you're a kid, somebody has to take you to auditions, and we had no money. There was nobody we couldn't pay to take, somebody to take me to auditions. My mom started working, so it was like there was nothing to do. My grandmother passed away. I broke my arm. Like all these things happened. So it was like, hey, we're just going to take a break. And then when my manager kept calling, like, hey, he should go on auditions again. He should go on auditions. So finally, when I was like 11 or 12, we said, okay. And we went to start going on auditions again, and boom, like Sopranos, they called up, we went there, and it was all like little Italian kids in like the leather jacket, like they were really playing it up and this, and I was, this little Irish kid with freckles and shit. But yeah, somehow it all worked out. The dream came true. But then, like, they said you got the TV show. And when I told everybody in my family, everybody's like, oh my God, like you're going to be famous. You're going to be on a TV show, this. So we went to film the TV show in Jersey. And I remember telling Tony Sirico, like, yeah, man, my family's so excited. We're going to be on a TV show. And he was like, oh, come on, kid. He's like, we do these shows all the time. He's like, we're never going to see each other again. Like, he's like, this is what it is. So then I was 12 years old, and I had to go back to my family and go like, nah, they do this shit all the time. Like, we're never going to see each other again. Like, we're not going to be famous and make money and like all this shit, it was all a dream. And then they called us back and said, we're going to make however many episodes they made the first season, 12 or 13. And then the show just like, it's weird because a lot of times when I do interviews and stuff, people ask like, when did the show take off and this? And I feel like for me, it was like it came out on a Monday, and Tuesday it was like fucking everybody loved it. I don't remember a time where it was like it was out and people weren't like really enjoying it.
Yeah. And you were only 12 then, right?
Yeah, I was 12.
So what was it like? I mean, all of a sudden, you were basically working full time as a kid, right?
Yeah. It would depend. Some episodes like you're in heavy, and then some you're not. But it was like it was great because it was like I would wake up and it's like you're either going to fucking school or you're going to work on Sopranos. And it was like when I got to work on Sopranos, it was like, oh, this is much better than school. They got food around. There's free food everywhere. The people are hanging out, having a good time. It was it was a nice it was a real treat. And everybody was from New York. There were no like big celebrities on the show. Everybody was just so like, you hear things about big shows in LA, and people will say like, I want a bigger camper, and like, I want to then like, nobody gave a shit about stuff like that. Like there would be, 10 campers and we'd all be in one hanging out, or we'd all be in like, if there was a restaurant nearby, we'd all just be sitting in a booth talking and laughing. Like it was really, I've gone on to do like a couple other little things since then. And when you go to these other things, you go, holy shit, what we had was so special. Because at first I thought this is what everything is like, like this is what acting is like. And then you go do other shit and you go like, wow, these people are really, they treated a lot, not that people weren't professional on Sopranos, because they were, but like they treated a lot more like a job, and as soon as they have 10 minutes to go, they have 10 minutes off. They're going and talking to agents and managers, and people have entourages and this. And it was like everybody on Sopranos showed up alone. Everybody did their work. And, some people said like the reason why people never became that way on Sopranos was because David Chase would just kill you off.
Yeah, I heard you say that.
Yeah, where it's like, hey, I want bigger, like get the next script, like and that's so but it was also just because everybody was great. Like all the people on the show were just like, it was crazy. And I think James being such a great guy really like set the tone. Where it was like if he's gonna be such a great guy and he's like the leader, he's at the top, it's like what somebody else is not going to come in and act like an asshole.
Yeah, and can you give us any examples of somebody who acted like a prick and then got killed off?
No, I wouldn't do that, but I think there definitely were, and there, I think that there might have been one or two people who were more unknown or whatever, where it was just like, oh, like you want to say this because and I'm sure other people might say different, but like from what I recall, like I don't remember once hearing like anybody's unhappy with their camper or like I didn't even know that that's a thing, like you hear it like, so yeah, I don't know. Like I just think I think Jim really set the tone for everybody to be like, hey, this is, and David, like we were all in New York and it was just a bunch of fucking regular guys. Like there was no, nobody was rolling up in a limo and acting like their shit doesn't stink or, and also nobody really came across like hey, I'm this incredible actor, so I should get this. And it was like everybody just was like, hey man, we're trying here, like we're everybody was happy. And I think, I was so young when I got the show that I didn't really have that thing of like, oh my God, this is a dream come true, where a lot of these people were older and they had been acting for so long and such incredible actors and actresses, and they never had that big break, So the fact that this was a big break and everyone loved the show and everyone got along, I think everybody was just so grateful to be there.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that's the thing. I mean, it was a unique cast because nobody really came in as a big star. Nobody was really that well established. And I think for the most part, I mean, I think it's fair to say most of the cast members were kind of like street guys and stuff, right? I mean, they grew up in normal lives.
For sure. And, Stevie Van Zandt obviously was a big name, and like Lorraine Bracco, people knew in this,
Oh,
but
yeah.
they showed up and they were, like you didn't know, like nobody acted a certain way. Everybody, like you just, it's crazy when you hear these stories of like other sets and this person won't talk to this person. And when the cameras go off, they go their separate ways. And it was like, people would come by to visit the set, for whatever reason, if they wanted a charity or this. And like, if they came in between takes, they would see like me, Jim, like somebody else and somebody else taking like a nap on the recliners in like the Sopranos living room, because that's, that was what we were doing. There was nobody who, and also it was a time before social media and Twitter, and then nobody was like, oh, we're going to like, nobody, not everybody had a fucking camera in their pocket the way they do now, which kind of changes the
Yeah.
way people act. And there's not that would have been happening a lot, I don't think, like on set, but I just think, that thing of like, we didn't have that feeling of like everything's being recorded that you have now, especially when you're on a set somewhere and you're like, oh my God, everybody's so sensitive. I don't want to say the wrong thing. I don't want to do the wrong thing. I don't want to, like, there was none of that.
Yeah, it seems like with that cast, and I heard you say something similar to this. It seems like that's one show where nobody really saw you guys as actors. You guys were treated as the Sopranos, as that family. Like I heard you tell a story once where they actually asked you one time if Tony hits you.
Yeah. Somebody came up to me and they're like, I have a question about the show. And I'm like, yeah. They're like, does Tony hit you? And, it was like 2 or 3 seasons in. I'm like, what do you mean? And they're like, well, like we never see him hit you, but I think he hits you. And I was like, I don't know, man. Whatever you see is what's going on. I'm like, you want me to make something? I don't understand. And then there was another thing where like somebody asked me what I did with the money. Like, like there's a scene where somebody gave me money and somebody was like, what'd you do with that money? And I was like, I don't know, I gave it back to the prop person who gave it to me. And they were like, oh man, they were like, nah, I would have taken that shit. Like, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, yeah, well, I'm not going to steal $40 from set when they're paying me like, thousands of dollars a month or whatever to act on the show. Like, but it's just, yeah, there was a lot of, a lot of weird experiences you have with people, but over the show's been on for, or was on, it was aired 24 years ago, 25 years. Experiences are very low compared to the amount of incredible experiences I've had and great people I've met and stuff like that.
Yeah, yeah. So what was it like for you once when the show really blew up? I mean, transitioning because you were basically a regular kid. You hang out in the park with your friends, you drink a little bit, get high, whatever. And all of a sudden you're kind of like a megastar. I mean, everybody knows you. What's it like, especially at that age?
Well, that was the thing, right? It's like when I was smoking, drinking in the park with my friends, like, especially during the summer, it was like 7 days a week. It was just like you go, you meet up, you smoke, you drink, you try and get enough money to get like another 20 of weed, and then you roll a couple blunts, and then you're like, all right, how do we get the next 20? And you're drinking or whatever. And it was cool because nobody who was 13, 14, 15, 16 watched Sopranos. So nobody ever knew, obviously like my close friends knew and whatever, but they had been my friends for, I'm actually planning like my best friend's bachelor party right now. We've been friends for over 30 years, so it was like, it didn't change anything. It wasn't this thing, but, when I was whatever, 16, 17 and got arrested. And then it was like, I kind of realized I'm like, all right, I can't be going to the park anymore because now I'm going to be on probation and whatever. So I started going out to clubs and like that was a big difference. That was where, because, again, there were no 16-year-olds who watched Sopranos, like literally zero, that I ever met at the time. But once I went to a club and it was people were 20, 25, 30, like everybody watched Sopranos. And what was great was the girls in the club didn't see Sopranos, but people would just tell them like that guy's on Sopranos. So they would think that like maybe I was a gangster or something like that. They didn't know that I like played the little asshole punk on the show. And like, I was probably crying in the last episode or doing some like stupid shit where they just heard like, oh, he's on Sopranos, and Sopranos is like the biggest show right now, So that was good. Cause even 20, like it wasn't a heavy, like our fan base wasn't heavy, like female, like every 10 guys that recognized me, there'd be one female,
Yeah. So, as far as school, now I also researched a little. I heard you talk about your school situation. You gave up school kind of early, right? Once The Sopranos really got going.
Yeah, I started smoking and drinking when I was like 12 and 13, where I was really like, oh man, this is what I want to put my time into, when I'm not working or whatever. And so school really started to like fall off and fall by this. Like I just, then it's like, oh, it's lunchtime. You want to get high at lunch, and then you're just fucking, you go back into school and you're like, oh, I just like, I'm not focused on anything except for like making sure nobody knows I'm high, like, or like you're fucking worried about where are we going drinking after school, trying to, so I just stopped focusing on school. And luckily it was around the exact time where Sopranos was taking off. So I transitioned into homeschooling probably around 14 years old or 15 years old or something like that. Cause they had me getting homeschooled on set, but then they transitioned to where I was getting homeschooled all the time,
Yeah. Now here's the thing. Now I actually do want to talk to you a little bit. I'd like to try to get through the Soprano stuff first, but I do want to talk to you a little bit about your drug and alcohol abuse, because I'm actually 2.5 years clean and sober, and we actually talk a lot on this channel about addiction and recovery. So the more I found out about your story, the more I started to wonder the later years in The Sopranos, because you were very close to AJ's age, you and your character, right?
Yeah,
You
the
were...
same basically. Congratulations on 2.5 years, by the way. It's great.
Oh, thank you very much, man. Yeah, so it started to seem, as I listened to your story and looking back on the show, it started to seem like I don't know if it was art imitating life or life imitating art, but you seem to be going through some of the same stuff on the show, going out to the clubs, drinking, hungover, stuff like that. Was that similar to your real life at the time?
A little bit, but you know what the thing is? It's like a lot of people ask me that, and they're like, "Oh, do you think Sopranos had anything to do?" And it's like everybody who I hung out with was doing the same shit. They just weren't on TV. It was like all of my friends were. Every single friend I had was doing the same shit, whether they were drinking, smoking, selling weed, doing whatever. Where it's like, if anything, the way I look at it is like Sopranos saved me. Like there were times where. When I was addicted to Percocet and taking 15 Percocet, I had money to take 15 Percocets, where there were guys who didn't have money to take 15 Percocets, and they would start to feel like shit and this, and somebody would say, hey man, this is cheaper. And if you want to do this, and they would have to, that's the way I look at that. Like Sopranos saved me. And also when I would think about what I had to lose, I have friends now who are 35 years old, still living with their mom. Like it's like, man, if that was me, it would have been a lot different especially when I decided to get sober, when it's like, hey, if you do get sober, this is what your life could be. You could move out to fucking LA and you could get a place and you could be in the sun all the time and be around your friends and this, where if it was, hey, you could get sober to go live with your mom in the same building you grew up in the same apartment. It's like, I don't know. I like to think hopefully I still would have, but I think it wouldn't be, because there were times where like I would wake up in the morning and fucking hate myself for the day or 3 days before that. And when I would think like, man, what are you doing to yourself? It would be a lot easier for me to go like, stop doing this. Look at what your life could be, instead of instead of what a lot of my friends were dealing with. And I think it's 5 of my friends who I brought to the premieres of The Sopranos are dead now.
Oh wow.
You
Sorry
know,
to hear that, bro.
yeah, man. And it's just like and they were all younger than I am right now when they died, and you go like, these are kids who I grew up in the same building with, like 2 floors away, and we were, doing the same exact shit. The only difference in my life was I was on a fucking TV show. So, a lot of people look at it like, oh man, could Sopranos have contributed to your this kind of lifestyle? And for me, I look at it as the thing that is the reason I'm sitting here today, and I've even told that to David Chase, I'm like, I don't know for sure, but I have a strong feeling in my head that if it wasn't for Sopranos, I don't know if I'd be here,
Yeah, I heard you say once that David Chase saved your life.
Yeah, that's how I feel. I feel that there's a couple people in this world where it's like, maybe if my manager never stopped me that day on the street, if David Chase never, uh, wrote Sopranos or whatever, I don't know. Maybe I'd be like my friends who aren't here anymore. And by the way, it's like, you talk a lot about your friends, 5 of my friends are dead in this, but, there's a lot of them who just because they're not dead, it's like what the position they're in or where they're at is like, Jesus, man. Like, it's just so, it hurts and it's hard. And you try and talk to people, but then I have such a great firsthand knowledge of like when I was fucked up, people trying to talk to me. And, it was like if anything got in the way of me getting high, I just wanted these people as far away from me as possible. And I don't want to do that to people I love or my friends. So, like, it's more of just letting them know, like, yo, if you ever do want to do this, if you ever want to change, if you want to do this, like, the other side is fucking it can be great, and I'm here for you.
Yeah, yeah. Um, so as The Sopranos went on, you like I was thinking about it earlier. It just seems like you guys were one big family, more so than a lot of TV shows. The closeness, you could almost feel it through the screen. You know what I mean? And I just wonder, what was it like for you? Like your relationship with Edie and James. Were they like parents to you? I mean, were they like a second mother or father to you?
We definitely went through phases. When I was 12 years old, it was different than when I was 22, or now that I'm 36. Like, we all the relationships have definitely changed over time. The only one that probably is still very similar is me and Jamie, where it's like, even though she's older than me, like, I feel like she's my little sister, where I'm like, she's such a great person, Jamie Lynn, who played Meadow, and she's just you know, I always just want her to be okay and want to like protect her. But I think, not that there's a big brother or a big sister thing, but I think we just there's not many people on this planet who could understand what we went through as well as we could understand each other's thing, because we were there for it, but also we were going through the same thing at the same time, where it was just it was a crazy ride. It was really crazy. And yeah, like, there were times where Jim and Edie definitely felt like a parental kind of thing. And then, the seasons where I was 20, 21, 22, it definitely felt a little more like, okay, now he's one of the guys. Like, when we were going out and we were drinking, or we were doing an appearance at a casino or this, like, and I was there, it wasn't really like, oh, the kids over here. Like, when I was 12, 13, 14, 15, it was definitely a lot more of like, oh, the kids are here, or the kids over here. We got to do this for the kid, or like whatever. Where, once I got older, I think that went away for sure.
Yeah. Did you did James or Edie or any of the cast members, when you were going through your drug and alcohol stuff, did they see it, and did they ever take you to the side and kind of try to talk to you about it or intervene?
No, because I mean, they would see me drink, but they would see me like the fun drinking, they would see like 9 p.m. to 3 a.m. maybe, or like, Edie never stayed out that late, but sometimes Jim would, or like some of the guys would, especially if we were like away somewhere and you were doing something, but more so like, yeah, they saw the fun stuff and hanging out at a bar and drinking or this. I think, I would stay up for 2 or 3 days doing drugs and partying and this. And I think even some of my best friends, never really saw that level of stuff because they didn't do that, So like when I was like, oh, we're going to this drug dealer's house where like the windows are painted black and we're going to sit there for 3 days doing coke and this, like my friends didn't know that was going on because they would never do something like, and some of them, like I have some of my best friends who went this way and some of my best friends who went that way. But even, there was a time where when I was going out to clubs and partying, I wasn't really hanging out with my best friends who I grew up with who were like, going down because they were the same way. Like maybe I didn't want other people to see me, what I was going through. They didn't want me to see or anybody at a lot of times, because I think, there's drugs like coke where they're social drugs and it's like, oh, everybody, we're sitting around doing coke and we're blah, blah, blah. And I do coke and you this, but there were, I had friends, you do other drugs, like fucking heroin where it's like, you don't sit around, or at least my friends, you didn't sit around to other people who don't do heroin talking about how you do heroin, So it was just, but they never really knew what I was going through. And also like, when they would see me drinking at bars and stuff, still like, that 16, 17 age, it really was still fun and like good. And even sometimes at 20, 21, 22, like there were dark times, but there were also, I stopped drinking for 9 months when I was like 22 years old to stop. Cause I was like, I can't stop doing coke. And I know a lot of people who loved coke, but I was not one of those people. I was like, I don't even like doing this shit. I just can't stop doing it because I love to drink so much and I don't want the party to ever end. And so yeah, I stopped drinking for 9 months when I was 22 just to stop doing coke. And then I was like, oh, well, I'm going to start drinking again when I was probably just turned 23 or whatever. But I was like, if I ever do coke again, that's it. I'm never having another drink. And then instead of fucking doing coke, I would be like, oh, people have ecstasy pills or people have Molly or people have this. And I would just do other shit in place of, doing coke. And then when I was 28, I stopped like the partying, like the drinking and all that stuff. And what were you up to? What was going on with you?
Well, that's the thing. Coke and alcohol, man. I always say it's like cereal and milk. Once you do them together, you can never do them apart. Like I'm kind of like you. My thing was I started kind of doing coke so I could drink more. Drinking was my thing. You get too drunk, you do a bump here and there, you wake right up, you can keep drinking, and then it gets to the point where it's the reverse. Yeah, I would do coke all day while I was drinking, but then I would need to drink a whole lot to go to sleep at night. And next thing you know, I'm physically addicted to alcohol. And, I went a good 20 years where I had a couple of years of sobriety here and there. But yeah, it always went back to that. And anytime I would go have a drink, I would be looking for some Coke right after that. I mean, I would need it. It's like you can't do one without the other. So.
Of course. And then people would be like, oh, we're going to go on vacation somewhere. Do you want to go? And I'm like, how are we going to get Coke there? Like, and
Yeah.
but like, I didn't even, because I, like you said, you'd have to drink a lot to sleep or whatever. I became addicted to Xanax. And for me, like, I understand everyone has their own thing and things affect people differently. But for me, like if you said you had to wake up tomorrow and you were addicted to, alcohol, cigarettes, opiates, like everything again, or Coke or whatever, or just Xanax, I'm taking everything else before Xanax. Because to me, Xanax was the only thing where I needed to get help to stop, because I was like, this is like all the other stuff. It's like, I would describe quitting some of them as hard, where quitting Xanax for me, I'm like, this is impossible. Like, I don't know how And by the way, like I know people who I grew up with who were taking 7 bars a day. Like I wasn't doing that shit. You know, I was taking maybe around 3 milligrams a day, but I took it every day for, 8 years, every day that I wasn't drinking, and trying to stop that on my own was just crazy. Like I felt like I was losing, like I never understood the stuff people would do for drugs, because like I said, luckily, like that's a way where for me Sopranos saved me. It's like I didn't have to go do those things. I didn't have to go do the things my friends were doing to get high if they couldn't or whatever. But I never even understood the fucked up shit that people would do until I was addicted to Xanax. And then you go like, man, I could imagine somebody doing fucking anything if they couldn't get their hands on these, because it's like it feels like life or death, where for me, even like opiates, I'm like, I've been sick before. Like I know I can deal with this, where when you do that Xanax shit, it's like this is not a human feeling to me, like the way that I would feel trying to stop that shit,
Bro, yeah, my thing was Ativan for a long time, again, because I always had the sleep issues. And another thing, my coke addiction was so out of control that my heart would get out of control doing too much coke. So I would take tons of Xanax to try to slow my heart down, so just so I could do more coke. It was one thing after another. But I was in rehab with a guy, and I'll tell you what, I mean, it took him about 5 months and $250,000 to get himself weaned off of Xanax. I mean, people don't understand. It's a nightmare, and that withdrawal will kill you. I mean, it can definitely.
Yeah, they say the only withdrawals you could die from are alcohol and Xanax.
Yep.
Right? Everything else is just, but like, I do understand how people say cigarettes are the hardest to quit, because it's like that shit is so in your face, like it's like I never walk when like the third day of me quitting fucking opiates, I didn't walk outside on the street and see people standing there just fucking chewing on Percocets. Like I'd imagine that would make it a lot harder, where it's like now cigarettes are not as much of a thing, but even like 10 years ago when you could smoke in a lot more places than this, it's like when you're trying to quit cigarettes and everywhere you fucking go, there's cigarettes in your face. It's got to be rough.
Bro, it's the one thing I can't quit. Yeah, it's
Really?
the one thing. Yeah. I quit cocaine and alcohol. I did 21 days in rehab. I haven't used since. But cigarettes, to me, I guess I feel in my own little addictive personality way that it's the only thing I got left. You know what I mean? So I kind of hang on to it.
I was, it's so crazy. I was smoking cigarettes from the time I was like maybe 13 or maybe, I don't know. And then, maybe around 16, it became like a pack a day, and then it became like 2. And then when I was drinking and fucking doing coke, I remember going to my friend's house sometimes. I'd buy a carton of cigarettes, and like 2 days later, you're like, we need to get more fucking cigarettes, because it was like, I'm giving them to people also, but like it becomes, when you're doing coke and drinking, it becomes like you have 11 fingers, like I just like, why would I not be smoking a cigarette right now? That's the question I would ask myself, like what's
what else am I gonna do?
Yeah, just fucking light it up. But I remember the first time I decided to quit cigarettes, I probably hadn't smoked a cigarette in 3 months, and one of my boys was like, yo, he actually, the friend who hooked us up, he was in St. Martin, and he's like, twice a year they'll pay me to bring down whatever 10 or 15 friends, and they give us hotel rooms, everything. We go down there. So he's like, do you want to go? I'm like, of course. Like, we'll fucking go down there, hang out. And I get off the plane in St. Martin, and they had like the duty free shop. And I saw it was like a sign, like 5 cartons of Marlboros for $80. And I was like, oh shit. I walked in, I buy the 5 carton pack. It was like it looked like a giant pack of cigarettes. I bought the 5 carton pack. I go outside, I fucking open a carton, I open a pack. I'm like packing them outside. I open it up, I start smoking. And all of a sudden I'm standing there and I'm going, I quit smoking 3 months ago. I just fucking, I don't know what, if it was my brain, like forget, or like, you're so in the habit of when I would get somewhere, like, and you'd see the fucking duty free cigarettes and you buy them, or what, I don't know what happened, but it was like, it slipped my fucking mind that I had quit smoking cigarettes. And so then I'm like, oh, well, I bought all these cigarettes, you know, now I got fucking 5 cartons of cigarettes. I got 50 packs. I'm like, yo, you know what? After this trip, like then I'll quit smoking again. So I had to go back to New York and fucking quit smoking all over again. But I'll never forget, like, I don't know how long it was. I'm making up 3 months. It could have been 3 weeks. It could have been 6 months. But I remember I had quit smoking for a while and I got off the plane. I bought the cigarettes and I was smoking a cigarette standing outside the airport. And I was like, holy shit, I fucking, and like, that's another reason why, like, you know, shit doesn't happen like that with opiates. Like if you're falling off the wagon with opiates, it's a fucking big decision, you know?
Yeah, yeah. Oh, yeah, absolutely. Without a doubt. That's one thing I never had an issue with. Was opiates, but I've seen people go through hell with them for sure. Um, what was your breaking point where you kind of like your rock bottom?
So on my 28th birthday, I took like 35 Molly, and it was just when I didn't take 35 like in my hand and take them. I took like 5, then a couple hours later took 5, then a couple hours. I mean, I can tell the story quick, but it's like we were going to my 28th birthday, we were going to a concert at Madison Square Garden, and I was at the point where I was like, I need to stop doing Molly because I was doing it a lot. And I was like, so this is gonna be like, you know, I'm gonna go big for my birthday and then we're gonna chill out. I wasn't thinking I was gonna stop, but I was like, we're gonna chill out. And because it had gotten to the point where it was like Coke, you know, where it was like I was just every where as soon as I'd be like, oh, I'm not doing Molly tonight, and then 3 drinks in, I'd be like, okay, where do we have to go to get Molly? Like, you know. And so we get to my friend's place and I took 5 and then we chilled for a couple hours. And I was like, okay, before we go to this concert, I'm going to take 5 more so that at the concert, I'm like really fucking feeling it. And by the way, I had been taking so many that this was not insane, you know, like it wasn't like this is going to be fucking crazy. Like I had built up a pretty good tolerance. So I take another 5 and then I take 5 more and I put them in like a ginger ale 20 ounce with tequila. And I'm like, yo, during the concert, if I feel like I'm not, like, I don't know if we're in there for 3 hours, 4 hours, whatever, like I'll sip on this if I feel like I'm getting too low or whatever. And we're walking up to Madison Square Garden and it's like, like I'm fucking buzzing. Like everything's good. I'm with some of my best friends. It's my birthday. Like we're feeling real good. And I have the ginger ale bottle and we're walking into Madison Square Garden and the guy goes, some guy's like, hey, and to me, and it was one of those moments where like my heart dropped. Like I was just so high and like I thought that he was gonna say like we were in trouble. I don't even know, but I remember like my heart dropping. And the guy is a security guy, and he's like, "You can't bring that bottle in here." And I was like, "Oh, no problem." And I just fucking drank the tequila with the 5 Molly in it. And I was inside the concert, and it was just like I remember there's pictures of me that I have where like I have a scarf on with like sunglasses on, and even with the fucking sunglasses and a scarf on, you're like, yo, this dude is fucked up. Like you could clearly tell. And then for the next, you know, 3 days or 2 days or whatever, I took like a Molly every hour or two, or I would take 2 and every 3 hours of this, but like I took about 35. And when I woke up from that hangover or whatever, I really thought that like I was never going to be the same. Like I thought I did some permanent damage to myself, and I was really fucked up for a couple days. I didn't eat for like 5 days or some shit. I was like, you know, like I compare it to like when people adopt a dog and the dog came from like an abusive house and you just see him like in the corner like shivering, and like if there's a loud noise he like puts his head down, and like that's how I was. Like I was fucked up. And I remember just being like, yo, if I'm again to you know, how did the Sopranos have an effect on my addiction? And it's like if that was the time where I was like, man, my life is so like I have so like I made it out. Like, you know, I got out of the like I was the guy when I go back to the neighborhood, I'm the guy who people see and they're like, oh, you fucking, you know, you got out of here. Like, good for you, you know, and like this where, and that's the fucking thought process I had was like, yo, you made it out. What the fuck are you doing to yourself? Like and now, even now, people congratulate me on like, wow, you know, you haven't done drugs or like there's people argue that you're not sober if like you smoke weed. And like for me, I don't feel that way, or I don't really care if how people see it as like sober or not. I just know for me, smoking weed has no effect on like it doesn't have that thing where other things do, where there's this pull of like,
Yeah, yeah.
man, I fucking really like, you know, I could go to somebody's place and take 2 hits of weed and watch a movie and then forget for 3 months that weed is even a thing that I am okay with doing, like that I will smoke. Like it's a very different thing for me. So occasionally I'll smoke weed, but besides that, like, I've been sober for a long time and people will come up to me and congratulate me on this. And I'm like, how am I supposed to feel good about getting myself out of something I did to myself? Like, I understand that there's this, the addiction, and it's tough. I'm not saying that I'm not proud of myself in a way, but I also want to be a realist and look at it in the way of like, you did that to your fucking self, man. You put yourself in that situation. So don't be like, hey man, I got fucking 9 years in this and like feeling all good about it, because there's the other side to it too, where it's like, what the fuck were you doing to yourself? Like, don't forget what you're capable of doing to yourself, because I realize now, even though like people would have looked at it back then, like, wow, you have everything, you're on Sopranos and you're this and you're going out and you're going to these award shows and this, it's like, I hated myself. I hated the way that I made myself feel every fucking night. And like now, it's so nice to wake up and be like, wow, thanks for not feeling like you want to die this morning. Like just that, just waking up and not feeling like I want to die is a fucking real incredible thing,
Bro, trust me, I'm grateful for it every day, man. Every day I wake up and my wrists don't hurt from having cuffs on them the night before, or I can remember what I did. I have a clear head. I know that I have a whole day ahead of me. I'm so grateful, but I'm the same way as you. I'm big on personal responsibility. I'm proud of myself for being clean and having that kind of time under my belt, but I'm also very angry at myself for ever having used, and I give the most credit to the people that never picked anything up to begin with. So yeah, I'm the same as you, man. I don't go with the whole "it's a disease, it's not your fault" thing. It was absolutely my fault.
Yeah. See, this. So when I went to like everything else I did on my own, and I had to go to a specialist to get off of Xanax, and what the guy told me was, because I was the same way, where I was like, oh, it's not a disease. Like, what do you mean it's a disease? And what the guy said to me was, he's like, you picking up your first beer is not a disease. He's like, when you drink and you make those decisions, he goes, but when you say, I want to go out tonight and have 6 drinks, and you have 45, he's like, that's that. He's like, that's the disease part, where you have no control over it once you get to that point. So he's like, he explained it to me 10 years ago or 9 years ago, whatever. So I don't remember exactly, but it made a lot more sense to me, where I'm like, okay, like when he's like, when you're going out and you want to have 9 drinks with your friends and you don't want to, and you're like, I'm not doing Coke tonight. And then you cut to, 40 drinks later and you're in a place and the fucking, you've been in here for days and you're barely having fun anymore. Like you're just fucking hurting yourself with this. He's like, why do you do that? And I go, I don't know. And he goes, yeah, that's the disease. Like, when you're going like, I don't know. Like, it's like, you're a ball rolling downhill, and halfway down the hill, you can't stop, and it's like, you're out of control. And that's the part where he's like, that's the disease. It's not walking into a bar and grabbing a drink. Cause I always felt like that's me. Like that's my decision. And the way, I'm sure everybody feels differently, but when he explained it that way to me, I really related to it.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you what. I mean, yeah, that definitely makes more sense. I agree with that. As far as that part being a disease, I just always blame myself for ever getting started when I knew ahead of time what I could be getting myself into. But I'll tell you what. I know you don't like to hear it, but the willpower you had with everything you were doing, the Xanax, the Percocets, alcohol, Molly, all that stuff. I mean, you got to give yourself some credit for having the willpower to stop and not being forced into it. I mean, you did it on your own, so I give you a lot of credit for that.
Yeah, I was talking to my boy the other day, and I'm like, I went to New York for the holidays, and I checked into a hotel for a couple of days, and I saw like when I got into the hotel, they had a full bar there, and not like 6 little mini airplane bottles, but it was like a full bottle of tequila, a full bottle of this. And I was like, man, what I'm most grateful for is that like I'm not somebody who saw that and went like, man, I got to call somebody, or like, hey, can you guys come take this out or this? Like I don't feel that pull anymore. Like again, I'm so grateful to, like, I didn't know you can wake up and feel great. You know,
Yeah.
like I didn't know that. And then once you start doing that, once you start waking up and feeling great sober, and then it keeps happening and happening, and you think like, oh my God, I have to do so much to feel, you know, I used to wake up and feel like shit until I popped that first Percocet. And then I was like, okay, now I don't feel like shit anymore. And then you pop another one and pop another one. Then I would start popping Xanax or, you know, whatever it was to try and get me to feel how I wanted. Where now it's like every day I wake up and I'm like, man, I'm so grateful and lucky to feel this way. And like, and then that's the part where like I can look at myself in the mirror and go like, hey man, thanks. Like, you know, like thanks for not, like we said before, like thanks for not making me feel like I want to die. You know, like this is, it's just, it's so nice to wake up and feel good. And I know, you know, I was actually watching Life of Crime on HBO. Do you ever see that documentary?
No.
So it's real, like real rugged about these people who are addicted and this, and like, you know, they were just talking about like how fucked up it was during Corona, how some people like lost their support system. And, you know, cause there's people who are 60 years old who are in these groups and they don't know from Zoom, and or maybe they don't even have a fucking laptop or a phone that could get them in, or they just didn't know how to do it. And this, and a lot of people, man, like just, you know, I don't want to give away anything for somebody who's going to watch the documentary, but there's a lot of sad shit that happened, you know, from Corona, on top of all the sad shit that everybody knows about that happened from Corona, you know?
Yeah, there definitely is. I lost a couple of friends since the whole thing started. It's sad. It's sad. And it certainly doesn't help people with addiction issues, or it didn't. So back to The Sopranos a little bit. What do you have a favorite scene or a favorite episode?
No, you know, I never watched the show.
Really?
Yeah. So
Oh, wow.
I can remember stuff that we did from 10 years ago or whatever, 20 years ago. But I don't really, I'm trying to think of what I mean, anything that I did with James, like you know, now because he's not around anymore, like I remember that fondly. And like there was only one scene in the whole show where I felt like I did a good job, like where I was like, wow, okay, like you did fucking, that was good. Where we're outside of the police station and he you know, he's like, you could have gone to jail, or you know, he's telling me whatever. That was I remember finishing that and being like, wow, that felt good. But anytime that we would get to do like dinner scenes where there would be, you know, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 people around the table, those were always the most fun, because it was like you're hanging out with your friends all day, you know, and you're laughing. And then, you know, in between, like, you know, sometimes you would work for literally 3 minutes and they'd be like, okay, you have an hour and a half now while we set up this next shot. So what are you going to do? You know, there were, again, it wasn't a time where everybody had their phones in their hands and social media and lost in their phones. So we would just sit around and, you know, like I remember fucking me and Jamie just sitting outside of the Silver Cup Studios where we shot and being like, all right, we have an hour and a half to kill. Like, what do you want to do? Like, how could we fucking, you know, and just it was, those were my favorite scenes when you found out that we were shooting those, where it was like, hey, everyone's going to be there today, you know, because there were times where it was like, you know, AJ has a scene where he's in school and I'd be like, okay, well, now I'm going to shoot a scene where I don't know anybody, you know, like I don't know. And then how's it going to go? I have no idea. Where like when you're 10 years in and working with these people and you find out you have a dinner scene, you're like, oh, I know exactly how this is going to go. You know, you just look who's on the call sheet and you go, oh, this is fucking great. And also it would be great when you got to work with people who you never got to work with, you know? So it's like, people always, you know, one of the closest people on the show to me was Vince Kiratola. Like we just got along so well, and I never worked with him, you know, or like maybe once or twice at, like, I think there was like a wedding scene or this, but even like, you know, I got along really well with Lorraine Bracco, and people would think like, oh, like you worked with Lorraine Bracco for 10 years. Like I never worked with Lorraine Bracco for one day, you know, like we never saw each other. We were never in the same scene. So it was interesting like that, where, you know, if you think of a show like ER or something, like all these people are working together, where on Sopranos it was very separated. You know, he had the stuff with Lorraine Bracco, then he had the stuff with like the mafia guys, then he had the stuff with his family. And if you were when you got the chance to like, hey, for some reason we're all going to be together, you know, so it sounds fucked up, but sometimes it's like, oh, there's a funeral and you're like, oh, good, we're all going to be together. You know, like everybody, obviously, you know, nobody really dies. So you're like, oh, this is, you know, like we're all hanging out today, you know?
Well, it's funny you mentioned that. Well, first of all, I think you were a phenomenal actor without a doubt. There's a lot
Thanks.
of scenes that I just think were incredible. You did an amazing job. But it's funny you mentioned the funeral thing because one of my most memorable scenes with AJ is when I think it was Jackie April's funeral. And this was, I believe, the day after Meadow kind of showed you a website about the mafia and stuff. And you were just starting to figure it out what was going on in your family, and you were leaning on the gravestone and you were looking around. You saw the FBI guys, you saw your father kind of crowded, you know, with a crowd around him of guys, and you looked over at him with this kind of suspicious look, and he just looked and winked at you like in slow motion. And I think that was one of the best scenes because it was like your coming of age, almost like you finally figuring out that your father wasn't like other fathers.
Yeah, I remember that well too, because there was, when you said like I'm leaning against a gravestone, there were people who worked for HBO who would be like on set photographers and take pictures of things that were going on. And I guess he took a picture of me leaning on the gravestone. And then for years after that, people would come up and be like, oh, can you sign this? Like standing outside of something, they'd be, oh, can you sign this? So I have that like burned into my head very well, like me on the gravestone and like leaning on it or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah, that was a great scene. Now, obviously, what we got to get to is the last. You were one of the very few people to be in uh, the final scene in the final episode. Um, what can you tell us about that scene?
You know, again, it was just for me, I didn't watch the show, so I didn't really understand the magnitude or like, you know, how big this moment was for me. And that's the thing, like if it was the last scene we shot, it would have felt like a much bigger deal. But when you shoot the show, you shoot the scenes out of sequence. So it would be like
Oh,
that was, you know, we didn't go like after that scene, it was like, all right, Sopranos is over. Like after that scene, it was like, all right, I'll see you tomorrow. You know, like we were working more and everybody was still spending time together. But yeah, I remember people like, man, we shot it at Holston's in New Jersey and people were outside of there like going nuts. I mean, Sopranos was probably at like its peak of like popularity, and we were shooting inside and they like put stuff over the windows so people couldn't see what was going on inside. And then it was just it was crazy. But again, like, you know, for me it was another day of work, you know, and it was I loved it, you know. Every when I look back, one of the reasons why I don't want to watch Sopranos is like my memory of Sopranos is perfect. Like when I look back, I go, that was such an incredible experience that like I don't want to go back and watch it and hate my performance or, you know, let it change anything about the way I feel about it. Because the way I feel right now is just it was perfect. The relationships I took from it, the stuff I learned, the growing up, it was all just, you know, it was really a experience that I'm grateful for every day, you know.
yeah, yeah. Well, I always ask anytime I have anybody on from The Sopranos, I have to ask, what's your theory on the ending of the show? What happened to Tony?
I think my theory on the ending of the show is exactly what it has become, which is it's been 14 years and I still get asked about it every day, you know? So it's like, I think that's the whole thing. Like, I think what could he have possibly done besides what he did that 14 years later would make people talk about something like that every day? Like, I love Breaking Bad, but I would
Oh yeah.
never go up to somebody from that show and ask them about the ending or talk about the ending or this. And I think the show is incredible, you know? So it's like, there is something, you know, like me and Jamie Lynn have a podcast and it's like every single time that we do a show or whatever, there's somebody who's like, what happened in the, you know, we've been doing a podcast now for like over 2 years. There's always
Yeah.
somebody who's like, what happened in the end? Like, what we want to know, like what, so it's like, there's that to me is my theory is like, David Chase is a genius and he did exactly what he meant to do with it. And I also think there was part of it where like, that feeling like that you had after watching that show, like the second it ended and it went to black, and that panic was like, that's what Tony had to deal with every single day. Every time he walked into a room, every time he sat somewhere, every time he did, that was how Tony felt. That was Tony's life of like, you like, oh my, what's going to happen? Constantly.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. Actually, that's a really good answer. Thank you.
What was your theory to what
I don't
happened?
know. I kind of always thought that he got killed in the end. That was my thing, just because of the way it was set up. You could feel the paranoia and that he seemed to have been feeling. It just seemed like a final scene to me. It seemed like it was all over. So I didn't want to think that, but that's kind of what I always felt.
Yeah, I can tell you this, that from being there, shooting it and everything, there was zero direction of like, hey, this is where Tony gets killed. There
Really?
was none of that. Yeah, there was no like, and by the way, like, even if David had that in his head of like, this is where Tony gets killed, none of us knew it. So why would he tell us to incorporate it into our acting? If anything, it would maybe change our acting to a way. So it was just, yeah, you guys are going to dinner, and that's it. Like, and and again, it's like, what else could he have possibly done that 15 years later, people still talk about on a daily basis? Like, I can't think of one show ever, or even like a movie where it ended and 15 years later, people are still talking about it every day.
Yeah, and it's fascinating because it's like I said when I was kind of promoting this interview. I was saying that the thing about interviewing people from The Sopranos is it's never going to die. Like, I still talk to people till this day who are just starting the series now. They didn't even watch it then. So it's amazing. I feel like 100 years from now, people are going to be watching that show and talking about it. So
that's an aspect of the ending that I've never thought about. And even though I haven't seen the show, like I've talked about it a lot and I've heard it talked about a lot, where like when I think of Breaking Bad, I think of it like it's over, like, like that piece of work or whatever. And I guess that's a great point of like that ending made a lot of people, I've talked about, it made a lot of people feel like it's not over. Like you just said, which is great. I never thought about that, but that's a great point where like there's still something in the air, about it. Wow, that's a great point.
Yeah, I think there is, and I think there always will be. Now I got to ask you. Obviously, this might be a harder question, but when James passed, James Gandolfini, what was that like for you? What kind of impact did that have on you?
What's really like, obviously he was just such an incredible guy, and thinking about him, everybody he was leaving behind and his family, and he's gone. I mean, it was just all horrible. But, on a personal level, I lost my grandfather, and I had to travel from, I think I was in California, and I had to travel back to New York for his funeral, and just everything. You're walking around New York City, and it's like nobody knew what I was going through. When it's crazy that when Jim passed away, not only did Jim pass away, but 1 out of every 10 people I walked by looked at me and said something about it, and they brought it up. So it's like, I remember when my grandfather passed away, and like, whether it's 2 or 3 days or whatever, there are those moments where you forget what just happened and what you're going through, where you just, for whatever reason. And this was one of those things where, I mean, for years, it was just something that you couldn't forget. Where I walked around, and everywhere I was, people would bring it up, and it was just a constant reminder of like, man, he's gone. And, the way that you feel like, Sopranos, there's still something in the air. Like with him, it's like, he was just such a great person, and he was like larger than life, and he had such a big impact on my life that really just going like, oh, he's gone. It wasn't easy to tell your brain or to try and figure out, how to deal with it. It was a very unique experience trying to deal with that. But him just, so sad for him, his family, everybody. I mean, there's just no, and then the crazy thing is too, it's like anytime I see somebody now, except for like Jamie, because I see Jamie so much, but like anybody else I see from Sopranos, when you haven't seen him for a year and you hug them hello, you just feel him. You feel him there. You feel like his presence is there. You feel like him and David Chase were. It's like that's the Sopranos right there.
Yeah, he seemed like such a larger than life figure and such a kind and compassionate guy. Everything I've heard about him. I heard you even speaking once about how he would just cut you guys checks because he felt bad, right? Because he
Yeah. He felt like he was making a lot of money and the people around him could be making more money. And he pulled us into his trailer one day and he cut us like huge checks, and he's just like, here, forget exactly what he said, but also, you know, that's that's one thing to do. But another thing, and by the way, it was one of those things where it's like, hey, we don't talk about this. Like, it wasn't one of those things where it's like, hey, now everybody go on Twitter and talked about how James just gave you a fucking check. Like, it was one of those things where like he did it, and that was his point of doing it, to do something for us. There was no like, oh my God, James is such a great guy. Like, look at what he did. Nobody would talk about it. And eventually somebody talked about it, I think after he passed away, just saying like what a great guy he was. So now like everybody talks about it and whatever. But that's one thing. But another thing that he was doing was, so when I forget if it was after he passed away or what, my manager told me that he used to call him and just check up on me and say like, don't tell Robert I'm calling you, but is he hanging out with the wrong people? How much money is he spending on rent? He's not doing it right. And by the way, that's the thing where like there was no reason for him to do that.
Yeah.
He wasn't looking for any sort of like, wow, you're such a good guy and what are this? He was only doing that because he cared and he was a fucking good person.
Yeah, that's awesome. The world definitely took a big loss when James passed.
Yeah, and
Um,
nobody like, I'm not I have family in fucking, construction who I see work their fucking balls off and you go like, man, that's fucking hard work. Like my uncle doing construction in New York City when it's fucking 8 degrees in this. But I don't think people understand, not what I did or what other people did. What James did on that show is such fucking hard work. Not only to constantly be going to those places mentally, but more so like, people think like, oh, acting is so easy. And, a lot of the times it is like, I would show up to work sometimes and be like, I can't fucking believe I'm getting paid to do this. But when you see the person who carries the show and what they go through, so it's like, let's say we got to start shooting at, 5 a.m. on a Monday. So if Jim is getting picked up at what, 4 a.m., maybe 3:30 a.m., depending on where we're filming, we get to set and then he ever works whatever 12, 14, 15, 16 hours, and then they go, okay, you're done for the night, but you got to be here at whatever the turnaround is. So there's a certain amount of hours that you have to give people, which let's
yeah,
say it's 8 hours. That doesn't count. So now let's say he has 8 hours from the time he's leaving set till the time he has to be back. Okay, well, he has to travel home, then he has to travel to set the next day. But the craziest thing to me is like he has to prepare for the 16 hours he's working tomorrow. So it's like as soon as he would fucking get off, and you would think like, okay, you know what? You got 7 hours, even if you get home, you got 6 hours to sleep. Like, that's great. It's like, no, he has to learn 5, 6, 7 pages of words to fucking memorize for the next day. And not only that, but you see his acting. He's so fucking incredible. And he would prepare with that. He had somebody who he went through that stuff with. So it was like it was the amount that he worked, and again, I'm not trying to say like, man, actors are such hard workers in this, but him specifically on that show, the amount of hours that he had to put into perfecting what he did and just, man, he was unbelievable. And he gets so much credit and I still don't think it's enough, because I really think he was that special.
yeah, he was an amazing actor, and you could definitely tell he put the work in because what a legacy he left behind. You know, he had a lot of other great roles, but even if Sopranos would have been all he had done during his life, I mean, what a thing to leave behind, honestly. An amazing series.
Yeah, and he made everyone around him better. Like
Yeah.
just you show up to do a scene with him where sometimes you think it's going to go one way, and then you do one take with him, and you go like, oh shit, no, this is something else, because it was just that's how good he was, man. He was really incredible.
Yeah, yeah. We all loved him, that's for sure. So, post Sopranos, after that was all over, you basically quit acting, right?
Yeah, again, like I think acting is one of those things where like you don't have to quit, right? Like if I wanted to go do, it's like drawing. Like somebody be like, "Oh, you quit drawing?" It's like, I don't know, I could fucking draw you something. Like, like, what do you want? So it's like I think it's something where like I didn't have to put in a 2 week notice, or whatever it is. I didn't have to let anyone know. I was just like, okay, I'm not doing this right now, and I did some things in between uh since then. And I just, when I was there, I was like, man, this isn't, I don't, luckily financially, Sopranos was great, but also I made some great investments, and like, I don't have to do acting right now, but also I started playing poker professionally, which was something that I like really wanted to see if I could do. And I moved to Vegas and I was doing that. And it was something that I learned, hey, if I ever get to a point where I have no money, this is something I can fall back on. Like, which was amazing to know that, because it was just and again, it's not that I'm such a great poker player. It's that if you go to Vegas and you sit at a poker table, you go, oh wow, all these people are drunk and they're fucking terrible, and they're always here and they always come to Vegas and they just have a good time. Like, there's people, when I was living in Vegas, I would have friends come to Vegas, lose $1,500, go home and call me and go, man, I can't wait to come back. And that's what Vegas is. That's what Vegas is full of. It's just people who, and listen, when you hear that, you go, well, that doesn't help me play fucking blackjack or roulette or this, because Vegas is always going to win. But when you play poker, you don't play against the casino. You play against other people, and these people are drunk, just there to have fun, and they don't go home crying when they lose this money. They're like, man, I was in Vegas playing poker. Like, yeah, I lost $500. I had a fucking blast. Like, and you feel that vibe. And I was in Vegas living there. When I wasn't partying, I was taking poker like seriously and really wanted to see, like, can I do this? So, yeah, long answer, but I don't know. I don't think acting is something that you have to necessarily like quit, or I never thought of it that way. So it's like, if the right thing came around, would I go back? Yeah, I still get offers to do stuff, but it's all just stuff where I go like, am I going to be happy doing that? Like, do I know I'm going to be like, if I say yes to that, and now, I'm again, it's just one of these things where like what we did was so incredible. And I've heard people make this comparison before, where it's like you played for the Yankees for 10 years. And now somebody's like, hey, you want to play like double A baseball, or like, for the worst team ever and this. And you're like, well, why would I want to do? And I understand why people would, or this, but just for me, the way I look at it is like, I'm good right now. Like I don't have that urge to do that. But then again, like, something could come up tomorrow where I'm like, man, like I did something 6 years ago or 5 years ago, whatever, because there was a bunch of friends doing it and it felt right. And I was like, yeah, sure. I don't think it's great that it's one of those things where like, there's nothing you need to do. If somebody asked me, do you want to act on this thing tomorrow? And I said, yes, you could be acting in 3 days. It's one of those things, which is most art, right? Like if somebody's like, oh, if somebody's a guitar player for 30 years and they don't play guitar for a year, and they could just start playing guitar tomorrow. There's not, there's nobody who tells you can't.
Yeah, no, it's true. I mean, it's your talent. So I mean, at any time you can use it. So yeah, that is a good way to look at it. And that's one of the things I found funny. Like, first of all, you're such a down to earth guy. I was really surprised by that. But I guess it's kind of like what you said. That's how a lot of the cast is. Just from, I'm looking at the comments, people are mentioning, your sense of humor and how down to earth you are. But one of the things I noticed about your personality, and I know I can't keep you on forever, so I'll try to hurry.
No, it's all good.
But you seem you're a free spirit. Like you seem like when you're done with something, you're done. Whether it be drinking and drugs or whatever. But it sounds like you even got to that point with poker, right, where you kind of just got tired of it.
I did. You know what it was? It's like I loved poker so much when I was doing 4 things and one of them was poker. But then after I got sober, I tried moving back to Vegas for a year, and I was just like, it was basically like I had a fucking job and I was just playing poker. I was sober. I was just fucking in Vegas playing poker. I had maybe 1 or 2 friends who lived in Vegas, but besides that, and then like I had all these people showing up and being like, "Hey, we're gonna go here. We're gonna do this." I'm like, I don't do that. Like, like I'm here to fucking. I was learning to cook. Like I wanted to be able to cook all my meals and eat healthy. I had a gym in the building. I wanted to work out, and I was playing poker. And then after like a long enough time with that, I think it was more, I was falling out of love with poker, but mainly because of the life I was living. It was like, I'm in this place where I grew up in New York City my whole life. I had fucking 2 friends on every block that I walked down in my neighborhood, So it was like to only have 2 friends in this whole town and to be, just playing poker. Again, it was more so because I still play poker now, but it's like, it was the lifestyle that was getting to me, and poker was just the thing I was doing nonstop. So in my head, I'm like, I fucking hate this because I didn't have those other outlets. I wasn't hanging out with my friends and seeing family and doing all this shit. And then poker was a thing I did. It was like when I was living in Vegas, it was like poker's the only fucking thing you do. So because even the best poker player in the world loses 35-40% of the time, So like when that 35% of the time is coming 100% of the time for 2 weeks and you're in Vegas and you're like, I don't have any friends here. The only thing I do is fucking play poker. I've been here for a year. The walls are closing in. Like it just made me go like fuck poker. Like I just wanted to push that away a little bit. But then as soon as I moved to LA and I was around people and enjoying my life again, then when I would go do poker, if I fucking lost, it was okay. Like if I didn't, it wasn't like I didn't put so much value into poker when I was enjoying my life, I guess.
Yeah. So you're in LA now, and you're doing the podcast with Jamie Lynn, right?
Yeah, I'm actually doing it right after this. Jamie Lynn and our friend Cassim, we do. It's called Pajama Pants, and it's just 3 friends bullshitting. There's never like a real structure. It's just a conversation.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, I checked out some episodes. It seems like you guys have fun when you do that.
Yeah, I mean, we were, before the pandemic happened and during pandemic, we were in studio for a while. And those times I look back, I go, man, that was fucking great. And it, you didn't know what you were getting into every time we showed up. And there was like a real, it felt electric, and now we do it over Zoom, which it's like this. It's like, you can have a great conversation with somebody over Zoom, but you can't compare it to sitting at a fucking table with somebody and really talking, it's just, there's the connection of like, I'm still staring at a screen, like I enjoyed this and I think we had a great conversation, but ultimately you're staring at a screen and
yeah.
The difference between sitting across from another human is just, there's something that's lost there,
Yeah, absolutely. And how is Jamie Lynn doing?
She's great. She moved to Texas with her family. She was living in California. She moved to Texas to live her life because fucking LA was shut down with Corona and everything. So she's there. She loves it. She's on a show right now, Big Sky. She's loving that. And yeah, she's one of the greatest people I know on planet Earth. She's such a sweet person. And I've known her for 25 years and I'm still waiting to see her mess up, in some way. Like, yeah, when we're out to dinner, like I'll just watch, I'm like, you're going to do something day where you're gonna be a bitch to somebody, but it hasn't come. It's been 25 years and I haven't seen her fuck up yet. She's incredible.
Yeah, well, good for Jamie. That's good. Not many people can go that long without fucking up. I know I can't.
Yeah.
So do you have anything coming up in the future yourself, anything you'd want to promote or anything other than the podcast?
No, I got something coming up that I can't talk about, which I hate when people like say that shit, but I haven't been able to say that for like 10 years. So it's but I did something that I can talk about that might be out in a week, it might be out in 2 weeks, it might be out in 3. People are gonna see it, and I'm interested to hear people's feedback on it, but I'm also even worried to talk about it on here because I know we're live and it can't be taken away. But just keep an eye out. I think people are gonna see something soon. I could say
All
that.
right. Good to hear. Well, listen, I want to thank you so much for this, Robert. This was fantastic. You know, I appreciate you giving me the opportunity. I know this is a very small channel, but these interviews are important to me, and you know, being able to do this with you is just fantastic. I couldn't be happier about it.
No, man, thanks for having me. Listen, it's better to do a fucking small channel because you don't have that pressure of, you're fucking worried about everything. But I don't know if it's a secret if I'm ruining it that you were gonna have Joe Perino on, but I just want to say any
Oh,
chance that I get to bump Joe Perino off of a podcast, oh, it's so sweet. So I just want to thank you because sometimes I gotta still let Joey know who's boss.
yeah.
He worked under me on Sopranos, and then he went and did Power, and he thinks he's a big shot, and he's ahead of the family. And sometimes you gotta let him know, hey, I made a call. I found out when is Joey doing the pod. I heard it was this exact time that we're doing it, Tuesday at 5:00. I said, you know what? I'm only available Tuesday at 5:00 then, because I want Joey to know. I want Joey to know that he got bumped. And it's your move now, Perino. What are you going to do, huh?
That's
No, but
hilarious.
in all seriousness, Joe Perino is one of my best friends in the world. He's like family, and he's really, again, like just like Jamie, like he's just such a great person. And yeah, I love him.
Yeah, he's a great actor too, and I'm looking forward to having him on as soon as possible.
Incredible actor. And like I said, if you ever want to have us both on at the same time, I'd love to come back with him.
Robert, I would be honored, man. Anytime.
Thanks, man.
Yeah, and I want to thank Ron, of course, for helping hook this up. And John DeLuca, I hear you're a fan of his restaurant, Don Pepe's in Ozone Park.
What do you think? I'm stupid? Who's not a fucking fan of Don Pepe? The only argument I hear is some people say Don Pepe and some people say Don Peps. What do you say?
I say Don Peps, but he told me
it's
Don Pepe.
Right. Yeah. They say Don Pepe. I just like the way Don Peps sound, It's
Me
like,
too.
Yeah. But listen, if you go there and you get the chicken Don Pep and the linguine white clams, it's the best experience. Like it's everything you want. I fucking love that place. Love that place. That's like one of those electric chair meals where I'm like, if I'm going to the fucking chair, what do I want to eat? The Don Peps is top 5, easy.
Oh, that's good, man. That's good to know. Yeah, and I'm gonna. He invited me there, so once I get to go there, that's what I'll order for sure. So thank you for the suggestion.
Incredible. The chicken Don Pep is one of the top 5 dishes I think anywhere. And every time I've gone there countless times, I've never had it once where you were like, it wasn't that good today,
Yeah, well, John should be happy. This was just a little commercial for his restaurant.
Yeah, John's great, man.
Yeah, he's a good dude. So yeah, I want to thank Ron and of course John DeLuca, and thank you so much, man. This, like, again, it meant the world to me. Good luck with everything in your future. Good luck with the podcast, and whatever any upcoming endeavors.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me, man. It was a pleasure.
Yep. All right. Have a good night, Robert. Hopefully, I'll talk to you again.
All right, I'll talk to you soon. Thanks. Bye, everybody.
Yep. Fantastic. Now I have to go over things in my head and think about all the questions I forgot to ask. But that went terrific. Thank you, everybody, for being here to support me. Robert is a great guy. I couldn't be happier with the way that went. So I appreciate you all. Anybody who sent a super chat, if I missed it, I'm sorry. I had the chat turned off for a little while, and I certainly didn't want to interrupt Robert to read anything. So thanks again, guys. I'm going to be back on in a little while just to talk about some other things, and do a regular show like I usually do. But until then, I love you all, and until next time, salute.